The first time I realized the darkness in Alaska could move on its own was the night it whispered my name from a place where no human voice should have existed. I wasn't half asleep. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't imagining things because of the endless night or the brutal cold. I was wide awake, standing outside my cabin with a flashlight in my hand, when that voice, low, hoarse, dragged across ice, spoke my name like it had been practicing it for years. And the worst part? It came from just a few feet away. From a patch of darkness so dense my flashlight couldn't cut through it. I froze instantly. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, but that wasn't why I couldn't move. It was the way the darkness felt alive, like it wasn't just absence of light, but something with weight, with temperature, with intent. The kind of darkness that doesn't just surround you. It watches you. I remember swallowing hard, my throat dry, listening for footsteps, for breathing, for anything that would explain what I'd heard. But nothing came. Not even wind. The world was dead silent, like Alaska had paused itself just to let me hear that voice more clearly. Maybe it was the wind, I thought. Except the wind doesn't say your name in a voice you've only ever heard in nightmares. I slowly raised my flashlight toward the treeline. The snow reflected the beam, but the trees swallowed it whole. I took one step closer, my boots crunching softly on the frozen ground. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My breath wasn't drifting upward or outward. It was pulling forward, toward the darkness, like something in there was slowly inhaling. That's when my brain finally screamed at me to run. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because something else happened, something worse. My flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then the beam suddenly stretched long and thin, like the light itself was being dragged into the trees. I jerked my hand back, but the beam bent unnaturally, stretching toward that same patch of shadow that had spoken. That's when I saw it. Not clearly. Not fully. But enough. Two shapes, too tall, too narrow, unfolded inside the darkness, rising like something waking from a long, slow sleep. They weren't human silhouettes. They were wrong. Incorrect. As if something had tried to imitate the shape of a person but didn't fully understand what a person looked like. My flashlight snapped back to normal, its beam trembling in my shaking hand. I took 3 steps back. The shapes took 3 steps forward. I didn't hear their footsteps. Didn't hear breathing. Didn't hear snow crunch. They moved in complete silence. And then from behind me, from the direction of my cabin, the same voice whispered my name again. I spun so fast I nearly slipped, but nothing was there except my small wooden cabin, half buried in snow. The windows were dark. I was alone. Completely, impossibly alone. Yet something knew my name. Something was standing behind me 1 second, and in front of me the next. I felt the darkness shift again, like a massive weight shifting its position. A pressure built in the air, like the night itself was holding its breath. Then, a second voice whispered my name from the treeline. Then a third. Then a fourth. All different. All wrong. All calling to me like they were waiting for me to answer. Something in the Alaska night had woken up, and it knew exactly who I was. Before everything went wrong, before the voices in the darkness and the impossible shapes in the treeline, my life in Alaska was quiet, predictable, peaceful in a way most people never get to experience. That's why I came out here in the first place, to escape noise, stress, and the never-ending pressure of city life. My name is Evan, I'm 33 years old, and 3 months ago I accepted a seasonal job with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. They needed someone to live alone at a remote observation cabin near the edge of the Brooks Range, track wildlife migration patterns, and report back weekly. The pay was good, the solitude appealed to me, and honestly, I thought a few months alone in the wilderness would help me reset my life. And for a while it did. The cabin sat in an open clearing, surrounded on all sides by thick pine forests and rolling snow-covered hills. No neighbors. No roads. No cell service. Just me, my radio equipment, a snowmobile, and the endless Alaskan sky. At that time of year, daylight barely existed. Just a soft bluish glow for a few hours each day before the world fell back into long, quiet night. It didn't bother me. The darkness felt peaceful then. Comforting even. On a normal evening, my routine was simple. It was usually around 6 p.m., though out here time hardly mattered. I'd finish recording wildlife notes, double-check the perimeter for tracks, stoke the cabin's wood stove, and warm a pot of coffee on top of it. Then I'd sit by the window with my notebook, listening to the distant crackle of ice shifting across the tundra, and the faint howl of wind brushing through the trees. Inside the cabin, everything felt safe. The orange glow of the fire, the quiet clicking of my wall clock, the familiar weight of the wool blanket draped over my shoulders, the scent of pine wood and strong black coffee. It felt like a world completely untouched by danger. Sometimes I'd step outside for a few minutes just to watch the northern lights slide across the sky like slow-moving rivers of color. Even in the bitter cold, I'd stand there letting the silence wrap around me. Silence so deep it almost hummed. I liked to believe nothing bad could exist in a place that beautiful. I'd been in Alaska for weeks without seeing anything unusual. The forest around my cabin was alive with normal things. Moose tracks, fox prints, distant wolves, the occasional shadow of an eagle gliding overhead. It was as if nature kept its dangerous secrets far from me. That night started like all the others. I was in a good mood. Calm, focused, clear-headed. I had just finished organizing my notes inside the cabin. The fire crackled softly behind me, and the frost on the windows shimmered in patterns that looked like silver feathers. I remember taking a long breath and feeling grateful for the stillness. The kind of peace you only find when the world is stripped down to nothing but you and the land. My only plan for the night was simple. Step outside, take one last temperature reading, scan the tree line for movement, and go back inside to sleep early. Nothing felt off. Nothing felt threatening. Even when the sky deepened into that strange, heavy shade of Arctic blue that meant the long night had truly begun, I felt no fear. I'd grown used to the darkness, trusted it. It was supposed to be just another ordinary night. A quiet, harmless winter evening in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know the night itself was watching. I didn't know something else was awake in the dark. And I had no reason to believe that stepping outside would be the last normal moment I'd ever have. The unease didn't start as something big. It never does. It began with the smallest, quietest shift in the world around me, something subtle enough that at first I thought I imagined it. I stepped outside with my clipboard tucked under my arm, ready to record the temperature like I did every evening. The snow crunched under my boots, a sharp, familiar sound. The air was still, but not unusually so. A soft ribbon of cold wind brushed past my face, carrying the faint scent of pine and distant frost. Everything felt normal, almost. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the beautiful, peaceful silence I'd grown used to, but a heavier, thicker quiet, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause. No rustling branches. No distant wolf calls. No shifting ice. Just stillness. A stillness that pressed against my ears. I frowned and looked toward the tree line, expecting to see the usual movement. Shadows of animals, drifting snow, something. But the trees stood unnaturally still, frozen like silhouettes cut out of black paper. The darkness between them looked deeper than usual too, almost like ink. I told myself it was just the long night playing tricks on my eyes. I took the temperature reading, exhaled, and watched my breath drift out into the cold air. But even the mist from my breath looked strange, like it hung longer than it should have, suspended in place before fading. That was when I heard it. A soft sound. Barely there. Crunch. My head snapped to the right. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either, maybe halfway between the cabin and the tree line. A single footstep in the snow. Slow. Deliberate. I froze. Out here, footsteps always mean something. Moose. Fox. Wolf. Human, though the last one was almost impossible. I wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody was scheduled to visit me for another week. I held my breath, waiting for a second sound. Nothing. Just the thick, unmoving silence. I tried to shake it off. Probably snow shifting. Or a tree limb dropping some frozen powder. It's easy to misinterpret noises in the dark when you're alone for weeks. Still, when I went to write the temperature down, my hand trembled slightly. I turned toward the cabin, ready to head inside when something else shifted. This time not a sound but a feeling. Like the air itself changed. A faint pressure crawled up the back of my neck, prickling my skin. I felt watched. It wasn't dramatic, not like something staring right into my eyes. More like a presence sitting just behind the tree line, observing quietly, patiently. Something I couldn't see but could feel. The kind of instinct your body reacts to before your brain catches up. I cleared my throat, forcing a laugh into the cold air. "You're alone, Evan. Stop freaking yourself out." But I didn't feel alone. When I took a step toward the cabin, the snow beneath my boot made a loud, sharp crunch that echoed far louder than it should have, like the whole forest was amplifying it. My pulse quickened just a little. Halfway back to the door, I heard another sound. Tap. Not a footstep. Not an animal. Almost like knuckles hitting wood. I whipped around. The cabin wall behind me was dark, the lantern light spilling only a few feet across the snow. Nothing was there. No movement. No figures. No animals. But I knew what I heard. Something tapped the wall. A slow uneasiness coiled itself into my chest. The kind that whispers, not screams, that something is wrong. Deeply wrong. I hurried up the steps and shut the cabin door behind me, locking it out of instinct. The fire still glowed warmly inside, and for a few seconds it calmed my nerves. The familiar creak of the floorboards, the smell of burning wood, the quiet tick of the clock, they reminded me I was safe. At least that's what I tried to believe. But as I stood there, listening to the silence settling around the cabin again, a question gnawed at me. If the forest was quiet, if nothing was moving, if no animals were nearby, then what made the footsteps? What tapped my wall? And why did it stop the moment I noticed? Something was out there. Something patient. Something waiting. I just didn't know yet what it wanted, or how close it was willing to get. I don't know why I turned around. Maybe it was the cold brushing the back of my neck. Maybe it was the way the forest suddenly went too quiet. Or maybe some instinct buried deep in my spine finally screamed loud enough for me to hear it. But the moment I looked over my shoulder, my entire world shifted. Because something was standing there. Something that hadn't been there a heartbeat before. At first I couldn't understand what I was seeing. It was tall, impossibly tall, stretched upward like someone had pulled a human shape until the bones nearly snapped. Its body was thin, too thin, like a shadow wearing skin. But it wasn't the shape that froze me. It was the way it stood, angled slightly forward, as if it had been leaning closer to me just a second ago, and had only backed away when I turned. My breath hitched. The atmosphere around me dropped, heavy and suffocating, like the air thickened just to trap every sound inside my chest. I couldn't hear my own breathing anymore. I couldn't hear the wind. Nothing moved. The forest felt dead. I blinked once, just once, and the thing twitched. Not a normal movement. It snapped into a new posture like a glitch in reality. A jerking, unnatural shift that made my stomach twist. One moment its head was tilted to the side, the next it was tilted to the other side, fast enough that I never saw the transition. My legs weakened and a cold rush washed through me, as if my blood forgot how to flow. Its face. I wish I could call it a face. There were features, but twisted, stretched, stripped of anything human. The eyes, those were the worst. Not because they were monstrous, but because they were almost normal. Too normal. Human-shaped, human-sized, set into a not even human skull. They looked like they didn't belong to that creature. Like someone had pressed stolen eyes into wet clay. And they were locked on me. The realization hit me slowly, like ice spreading through my chest. It had been watching me long before I turned around. Something inside me snapped. Something deeper than fear. This wasn't just wrong. This wasn't just dangerous. This was something that shouldn't exist. Something that felt older than the forest around me. Something that shouldn't have noticed me at all yet somehow knew I was here, breathing, trembling, staring back at it. I took a step backward, barely a shuffle, and the creature reacted immediately. Its body tensed, spine arching like an animal ready to pounce. The air vibrated with a low, pulsing hum, so faint I thought it was inside my head. A warning. A claim. Promise. My heartbeat climbed my throat. My hands shook. I wanted to run, scream, hide anything, but my body refused to move. Every instinct told me that any sudden motion, any noise, any breath too loud, would turn that thing from observing to attacking. And then it smiled. Not with lips. Those were ripped at the corners. But something underneath stretched, widened, distorted. The expression wasn't joy or hunger or anger. It was recognition. Like it already knew how this would end. Like it had done this before. That was when I understood the truth. The strange sounds, the cold air, the shifting shadows, they weren't random. They were warnings. Signs. And I had ignored every single one until it was too late. Because the horror wasn't approaching. It was already here. and it was waiting for me to make the next move. I don't remember deciding to run. My body moved before my mind could catch up, pure instinct taking control. 1 second I was staring at that thing twisting its face into a nightmare grin. And the next I was tearing through the trees, lungs burning, branches whipping my arms and face. The forest exploded back to life around me. Every sound I'd been straining to hear came roaring in at once. The pounding of my footsteps, the violent crack of branches snapping behind me, the terrifying rush of something enormous moving far too fast. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. The moment I did, I knew I'd freeze, and freezing meant dying. My breath hitched as the ground dipped beneath me, sending me stumbling, almost falling. I barely caught myself on a tree trunk before pushing off again, forcing my legs to keep going. I could hear it behind me. Its movements weren't footsteps, not really. They were heavier, uneven, as if the creature was slamming parts of its body into the earth just to launch itself forward. The sound grew closer. I veered left, ducking under a fallen branch, but something swept behind me. A rush of displaced air, so close it lifted the hair on the back of my neck. I threw myself sideways, rolling across the dirt just as something sharp sliced through the space where my spine had been a heartbeat before. Pain erupted across my arm as a branch stabbed into me during the fall, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. I pushed myself upright, vision blurring, and sprinted again. My heartbeat thundered so loudly it drowned everything else out, but the crashing behind me kept breaking through. Faster. Closer. Hungry. The trees thinned for a moment, giving me a glimpse of the moonlight above, but that also meant I was exposed. I darted toward a cluster of rocks, skidding behind them, pressing myself flat against the cold surface. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. I tried to quiet it, pressing a hand over my mouth. The forest went still. Too still. I didn't know if that meant it lost me or if it was listening. The silence stretched on, suffocating. My heartbeat felt like a drum the creature could hear from miles away. I slowly peeked over the rock, and immediately dropped back down, stomach flipping violently. It was standing there. Not moving. Not searching. Just waiting. Facing the exact direction I was hiding, its head tilted at a sickening angle, as if it already knew exactly where I was but wanted to drag out the moment. A tremor ran through me so violently the leaves beneath my hand crackled. The creature twitched. I bolted. I didn't think, I just ran. The moment I moved, the forest detonated behind me. A guttural, distorted sound ripped through the trees, something that didn't sound like a scream or a roar, but like both blended together and sharpened into a weapon. I sprinted downhill, almost tripping, my legs wobbling as if they no longer knew how to hold me up. The ground blurred. My lungs ached. Every breath felt like glass. Shadows tore past me, and every single one felt like a hand reaching out to drag me down. I saw a gap, a narrow space between two massive tree roots, and threw myself toward it. I slid on my side, dirt filling my mouth, rocks scraping my ribs. The creature's arm, if you could call that long, jagged limb an arm, slammed into the ground behind me, missing by inches. Dirt and splinters blasted across my back. I crawled, kicking, dragging myself forward until I burst out the other side, scrambling to my feet and running again. My vision pulsed. My ears rang. My entire body throbbed with terror. Then light. Not daylight. Not safety. But a faint, flickering glow ahead of me. A chance. Any chance. I sprinted toward it with everything I had left, knowing that if I slowed even for a second, if I hesitated even once, that thing would close the distance and the story would end right there. I didn't escape. Not yet. But I was still alive and the creature was still coming. I didn't feel the cold until I stopped running. My body slammed against a wooden wall, an old supply shed near the abandoned outpost I'd passed hours earlier. I didn't remember getting here. My legs had simply carried me, blind and desperate, until they couldn't anymore. For a long moment I just leaned there, gasping, gripping the frozen siding as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. The forest behind me was dark and motionless. No sound. No movement. No creature. But that kind of silence in Alaska? It wasn't normal. It was the kind of silence that felt placed there, like someone or something pressed its hand over the world to hush it. I slid inside the shed and shut the door as quietly as I could. My hand shook so badly I could barely latch it. The small space was cluttered with old tools, rusted cans, a coil of rope, nothing useful. My breath fogged in the dark. Every exhale felt too loud. For a few minutes I just listened. Nothing. And for the first time since the nightmare started, a tiny thread of hope crawled into my chest. Maybe I had outrun it. Maybe it lost the trail. Maybe the distance, the trees, the rocks, maybe something broke the chase. I sank to the floor, hugging my knees, trying to steady my breathing. My whole body hurt. My arm throbbed. My legs were trembling uncontrollably. But I was alive. Alive. I told myself that over and over. After a while, minutes, maybe an hour, I lifted my head. The shed still looked ordinary. No claw marks. No footprints at the door. No shadows shifting in ways they shouldn't. But the moment I let myself believe I was safe, something cracked outside. My heart lurched into my throat. Not a twig. Not snow collapsing. Footstep. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. I pressed both hands over my mouth, praying my breath wouldn't give me away. The step came again, closer this time, then stopped right outside the thin wooden wall. Silence. A long, horrible silence. I didn't move for what felt like years. And eventually, slowly, the tension eased. The cold returned to my skin. The weakness returned to my legs. Maybe it was an animal. Or the wind shifting the snowpack. Or exhaustion twisting my senses. Eventually, exhaustion won over fear and I must have blacked out. When I woke again, light was seeping through the cracks in the wall. A dim, pale glow, the closest thing to morning Alaska gets in deep winter. I forced myself up, every muscle screaming, and cracked the shed door open. The world was quiet. Gentle. Fresh snow covered the ground in a smooth, untouched blanket. It looked peaceful, almost too peaceful. No footprints. No dragged marks. No disturbed patches where something massive might have moved. It was perfect snow. Unbroken. Almost like nothing had been there at all. For a moment I wondered if the creature had been a hallucination. Born of isolation, cold, exhaustion. But then my arm burned sharply, pulling my attention downward. The gash on my skin wasn't a hallucination. The bruises weren't hallucinations. The ripped fabric of my jacket wasn't hallucination. I turned back toward the forest. Something was wrong. The trees looked different. Not damaged, not broken, just rearranged, as if parts of the forest had shifted during the night. A path that should have curved right now curved left. A tree I remembered leaning one direction now leaned the opposite way. And then I saw it. Far beyond the tree line. Barely visible. Almost swallowed by the shadows. A shape standing absolutely still. Half hidden behind the trunks. Watching. I blinked and it was gone. Just gone. But the snow beneath the trees wasn't perfect anymore. It wasn't untouched. One long trail of footprints, deep, wide, and spaced far too far apart for any human, led deeper into the forest. Not away from me. Not back where it came from. But in a slow, deliberate circle back toward the shed I had slept in. I stared at the pattern, my breath catching in my throat as I followed the looping path with my eyes. It didn't make sense. No creature, nothing alive, walks in a perfect circle around its prey and then leaves without finishing the hunt. Unless it wasn't leaving. Unless it was waiting. Unless it's still out there, waiting for the dark to last long enough again.